Hello and welcome to Knowledge by Nature. In today's video, we are going to be doing a flip through of Dimensions Math Level 6. Now, if you have been following me for very long, you know that I have been a Singapore math user from the very beginning. We used it in kindergarten and we have used it all the way through 5th grade. I have all sorts of videos which I will put up here and try to add some to the description below. Singapore Math did send this to me for no cost for my honest review and opinion. And as always, I try to be as honest as I can. And just know I've used this for a really, really long time. Now, knowing that I have used this for a very, very long time, I'm not gonna lie, I was really, really nervous about this year because as you can see, there is a different dimensions, although it is pretty much the same, you can see that they redid it. So pre-K through 5B is going to look like this. And then you move into 6A and B and it looks like this. First, just looking at it, I was like really intimidated thinking, oh no, what are we gonna do? And so for the first time this year, I was actually looking at a lot of different curriculums. I'm going to have a quick intro here and then we'll dive into it. So just be patient or I'll put a timestamp, but I want to talk through this just a little bit because if you have used this and you have been successful with this, it may seem a little nerve-wracking to go to this because it is different. It looks different inside. Some of the books are a little bit different, but as I was looking and kind of venturing out, figuring out what are we going to do for 6th grade, I found it extremely difficult to find any sort of program that was on level with this that would be 6th grade. So I was really having difficulty. I wasn't able to even really find a very good alternative to move in that would be this level. We would be going into different levels. So that is where I was at. I was really, really nervous about this year. But I've got to tell you, I am now really, really excited after getting to look at the books, dive into it. And I honestly think this may work even better. Now, I did talk to Singapore Math and I was asking them if there was any work in the progress of maybe making these 6, 7, and 8, this version here, updating it. As of April 2025, it doesn't sound like there's going to be any sort of updates or anything for level 6, 7, and 8. 7 and 8 look really, really intense, but we are just going to be talking about 6 today, and that is what we are going to get into. And that way, if you are in this boat, I want to try to help calm the waters for you and know that if you are going through the whole first dimensions, don't be scared of this level. Granted, I haven't used it before, but I think once you dive into it, you see it, and you've already been a Singapore Math, I don't think you need to be afraid of this. If you were like me, I don't know what it was. I was just like, oh no, it's going to be different. This has worked great. This is going to be great. This one isn't going to be great. I am pumped. I am honestly pumped about it. So one of the things that is the same is you have your teacher's guide. You do not have a home instructor's guide. So if you use Dimensions and you like the home instructor's guide, they don't make that, but they do have a teacher's guide. And I really like it. And even if you are a home instructor's guide user, don't lose faith yet because I want to show you, okay? You have your 6A, your textbook. You have your 6B textbook. You have your 6A workbook and your 6B workbook. And one of the bigger changes is that normally you would have the workbook answers inside your teacher's guide. Now you have a separate little companion book here where it has the solutions for 6A and 6B. So instead of it being in the teacher's guide, it's just a very small little book that coordinates with both of these. Continuing on with a few things that are just a little bit different, which I normally don't get the test book, but your previous levels had that option where these levels do not have the option of getting a test book. So if you need a test book, do not have a separate test book. Another thing you might be interested, because as we get up into these higher levels, specifically 6B, we're talking algebra. Okay, we're talking algebra with 6B. There are the subscription videos. Now, whether they are the same as the one that I have already reviewed, I am not sure. I might have to jump on and see how they look, but I will put that down below where I did review the subscription video. So it would be interesting to see if it's the same teacher, if it's something different. I will be kind of eyeing that, looking at it, but if you need this to be like given to your student and you not be the teacher so much, they do have the video subscription. So be sure and check into that if you're just not prepared to teach this level. All right, now that we've talked about some of the things that are the same and some of the things that are different, let's go ahead and let's dive in. As usual, I'm going to start with our 6A because, one, that is just the start of the semester. So we have our 6A that you begin with, and we have our 6B. So we have our workbook, we have our textbook, and then we have our teacher's guide. Now, I'm actually going to begin diving in with the textbook here because it actually shows what the contents are a little bit better than what the teacher's guide does. So let's jump in to this one right here. First, we are still looking at color. So even though it is different, we are looking at color in our textbook here. This is a series designed to teach middle school students foundational skills in mathematics. It follows the Singapore math framework. So this is still our Singapore math. This is still dimensions math. It just, I believe, has maybe a few different authors. It was definitely published at a different time. And so it just hasn't been maybe updated. Again, I'm really, really liking it. So let's zoom in. Let's look at this page together. All right, I know if you're looking at this for yourself, you want to actually see it, right? So hopefully I have this zoomed in close enough for you. So we have our textbook features. So it's very well balanced. I don't feel like it's super duper crowded, but it does have a lot of different aspects to it that are original, that our previous levels didn't have. We have our chapter opener just like the other levels. We also are going to have little examples. Then within that example, we're going to have a try it section. There's going to be little recall sections where it's bringing like concepts or definitions that have been covered earlier to the current topic. We have different remarks in these little side bubbles. There's little math bits there that provide fascinating facts related to the current topic. Then we have little discussion boxes here that poses thought-provoking questions related to what we're learning. Over here, we have like a little class activity. Again, this is built for the classroom, just like our other levels were. Very easy to accommodate for a homeschooler though. We have little problem-solving corners. We have a basic practice. So this is like an exercise page, and I'm going to show you that too because that's a little bit different than what we've seen before. We've got our basic practice, our further practice, which is more challenging. So with our basic, it is what it says. It's very basic in that it is simple questions that involve direct application of the concepts. Then we have a little bit of our further practice where we have more challenging questions. Then we have our math work, which provides questions that involve the application of integrated concepts. We have BrainWorks, which provides higher order thinking questions. So you can see there's like multiple levels right here on this little practice page, and we'll look at a full-blown page of this too. And then they have something that I think is pretty cool is there is a page that's called In a Nutshell, and it consolidates like all the rules or the major concepts that we've been learning on one page. So you could like quickly go back and reference that. So along with the In a Nutshell page, another thing that is new this time is write in your journal. So they are actually having them keep a journal to encourage them to kind of reflect on the things that they have learned. So that's kind of neat. There's definitely some new things added in here. Now let's go on. So here we are at the content. So while the teacher's guide has a sequence, it doesn't break it down. So that's why I wanted to show you in this. So we're going to zoom up again so we can see really nicely what we're looking at. In chapter 1, we are looking at whole numbers, where we've got our order of operations, everything that's in that section, factors and multiples, multiplication, division. Then we have in a nutshell, write in your journal, extend your learning curve, and problem solving center. Chapter 2 is fractions, multiplication of fractions, all of the things that are going to be covered with that, division of fractions. Then we have the in the nutshell, the journal, the extend, and the problem solving. Chapter 3, we are working with the decimals, addition and subtraction of decimals, multiplication of decimals, division of decimals. We're looking at the metric measurements and decimals, and then we have the 4 things ending again. Chapter 4 is our negative numbers, positive and negative numbers, comparing positive and negative numbers, and then on this one we have in a nutshell, write in your journal, extend. So you don't have a problem solving corner on that one. Section 5 is ratios, ratios and equivalent ratios, ratios and fractions, and then we have all 4 of our ending there. All right, to wrap up 6A, we have rate, where we're working with the average rate, unit rate, speed, and the 4 ending sections here. And then percent, there are 2 things that we're covering with that, and we have our 4 sections there. We have the answers on page 214. So as you notice, it says answers here, and we are in the textbook here. So if you were to just give your child this book, know that the answers to all of the questions that are in this are in the back of that. So that might be something possibly that you need to take into consideration, knowing that all of the answers are back here. Now, just like before, we have a chapter opener, and this is where they are talking about arithmetic. So 6A is going to be working heavily with arithmetic, where 6B is moving over into algebraic equations and things of that fashion. So there's 2 different levels, just like normal, but it kind of makes a pretty hard transition here, where we are going from like arithmetic to full-blown, like, I don't know if we're talking pre-algebra or what over there. So while here is our first lesson, and while this is definitely different, I really like it. The little kids are cute. They're not the same kids that we had before. There's still some color. I think it's really, really cute. Now, there are a few things as far as before where you would have like the little pencil that showed you where to go to the workbook. I don't see where that is like stopping you in here, but it does tell you over in the teacher's guide. Now that we have went through what is covered, let's go ahead and look at the teacher's guide. This looks very familiar. If you've used any dimensions, we have this mathematical framework here, and then it talks about how this is set up into different components. So we have each lesson typically follows a 5-stage plan, where we have our introduction of the concept. We have the development of the concepts, the procedures, the skills. We have the application, the extension, and the conclusion. So before we might have had that think, learn, and do. We have just a little bit different verbiage here, but very, very similar. Math lessons are designed to be taught in a single 50 to 60 minute period. However, they can be adjusted to suit the student's pace and schedules. At the end of each chapter, you're going to find these additional sections, which we briefly spoke about already, which is the nutshell, the journal, the extending your learning curve, and the problem solving corner. It does say here that the practice lessons do not follow the same format as other lessons. These lessons are the exercises in the textbook and are meant to consolidate and extend learning from previous lessons. So you can kind of think of these practice lessons as a review that we might have seen previously, where it was broken out and you might have like review 1 or practice 1 actually. And then calculators, we're going to start maybe using some calculators at your discretion. Generally, they want them to do it to where they can write it, and that the calculators are not super necessary, but that they can be used, especially for more complex problems, and to kind of get them used to using a calculator. It mentions how the workbook can be used in various ways. So depending on how you want to use it, it can be done as like, it says homework, but maybe they go do it by themselves. Now remember, this was made for the classroom, so they are saying, hey, you could assign this as homework, or this could be where they go and they do it more independently. And where before there was a lot of practice in the textbook, I didn't use the workbook a ton. This is going to be a little bit different. This time I see that we're going to be using the textbook a lot less and the workbook a lot more. So for instance, we wrote in our textbook the whole time. So I actually had spiral bounding put on the textbook, but I didn't have it put on the workbook. This time, I think we're going to be getting it reversed, where I will probably spiral bound the workbook and leave the textbook, because I don't think we're going to be writing in the textbook. And again, I'll show you why that is the case. Back to the workbook, they're saying that if the students finish their problems early, again, this is our classroom, that they could do it. If they don't want to do the problems in the textbook, they could do the workbooks, and then additional practice lessons can be taught using the workbook. So again, that's what we usually did. If we needed a little bit of extra practice on the textbook, we would use the workbook. But again, I think our actual main practice is going to be on the workbook now. Then it goes into talking about how they're using the notebooks, and they are saying that the students should record the solutions and other mathematical ideas, and that kind of getting them to write it down on pen and paper. They kind of put it in their own words to help them recall that knowledge. All right, we come over here to our content where we have our whole numbers, and those are the lessons. Same thing. You can see it's not broken down by individuals, so it's kind of hard to show you, which is why I showed you in the textbook. Over on page 297, it has templates, so let's look at that really quick. So this makes me think this is what might be called the black line master. So these are like the little templates of things that you might need. We have a 100 chart. We have a thermometer template, a 100 grid, and then a note section. So there's not very many templates in that one, but it is on there. Moving over into chapter 1, we're looking at our whole numbers where we have the lessons going down the side. It shows that each class period is going to be one lesson per lesson unless you need to modify it. As before, we have our objectives. We have our textbook and workbook pages that coordinate with each lesson, the teacher guide that coordinates with each lesson, and then additional materials that are going to be needed. So you can see lesson 2, we're going to need some calculators. Lesson 5, we're going to need 1-inch tile squares, counters, things like that. This continues on to the next page, and I'll zoom in a little bit here where it follows the same thing. So we have all 15 lessons, and you can see each of those are just taking one class period at that time. And you can also see we have some that have no workbook that is going along with it, which is just a little bit different. Here is where it is making the notation that arithmetic is the study of numbers and their properties. In Dimensions Math 6B, students will make the transition from arithmetic to algebra. So a good understanding of arithmetic is fundamental as students make this transition, because the same properties that hold for arithmetic also hold for algebra. It goes along to talk about all the expressions and the equations and how they all kind of tie in together. And then we move over to our chapter 1. So it has a little preview of how we are going to address this, little examples of what is correct, what is incorrect, and different devices and stuff that we may not actually want to use with this program. All right, continuing over here with the lesson for the teacher. So this is just, again, breaking everything out for you, stepping it out as to what each one would be before moving over in here to our chapter 1 of whole numbers. So this is the lesson notes for the teacher. Again, just really breaking everything down, what students were learning in dimensions 1 through 5, and how those things are going to be applying to dimensions 6. We've had bar models before, and in this section, we are going to be dealing with before and after models, which we will actually see over on a little problem solving center. But again, it kind of shows you, works out a few problems as an example. Students that have never used bar models before, if you're coming in from a new program or you just need a little bit of extra practice, it talks about using dimensions 3 through 5. Now, we come over to our chapter opener, which we have seen before. Just like in the previous, I have a picture of the student's text. So if I go back one here, we will see the chapter opener. So while it is small, it is there and I can still read it. It's not like so small that I can't read anything, and it's just a very quick introduction. So normally you're going to do your chapter opener and then you're going to do lesson 1 all in the same day. I don't think I've ever not done it that way. It's intended to kind of introduce the topic, and then we're going to go to chapter 1. Now, if we bounce back here really quickly, we can see that lesson 1 is going to be textbook 1 through 4 and the teacher's guide page 7. So you can see we are starting here with our first lesson, then moving over to the notes for the entire lesson here. So here we have the order of operations and then B, the exponents. So if we move over here to the student book, you can see this is what they've got. So we have all the little teaching. It's teaching them quite a bit of things. It's bolding certain things that we need to make sure that we are drawing out and paying attention to. There's these different remarks here on all sides. You can see that the children are talking just like they did before. And if we're looking and we're just going through problem A here, we have an example. So the first example, and let's zoom in on that so we can see it nicely. The first example is it's having them write an expression for each of the following statements, and then it is showing the solution for that. Once they have kind of read through all of that, they're going to try it themselves. And so they will write an expression for each of the following. Now, in the other teacher's book, you would have like little red letters on the page. This time, the answers for the try it within the textbook are right down here at the bottom. So the answers that we will need are going to be right here. Now, another thing that I'm finding different is as we come through here and we do the applications, we have this little star, workbook page 1. Going ahead and pulling over our workbook, let's just kind of look at all of this together. This it's not black and white, but it is blue, black and white. So I do like that there's just a little bit of pop of color, but we're going to go to workbook. We're going to go to workbook page 1. Workbook page 1 has some basics, the practice, and then a challenge. Not a whole lot different. I do feel like there might be a little bit less work overall, but not a significant difference. But just as before, you have like this basic practice, your regular practice, and then more challenging questions on that next side. Then you'll also see that we have whole numbers 1.1b. So here we had 1.1a. I think a lot of this may be trial and error, trying to figure out like exactly when is the best time. So we've talked about this first one, and then I could assign that page. Or we could talk about it, we could try it, and then that will just be her work that she has later. Now moving on, we come over here to our extension, and we are going to read and discuss page 3, which is our exponents page. And so I'll put that right here so you can see it. We are talking about exponents here. We've got our remarks, little children talking, and then we come over here to the examples. Example of an example of here are the questions, here are the answers. That's how they worked those out. Little remarks. And then they have a try it section. So then they would try that section. Then we would come over here and we would have example number 3. We would look at that, then they would try it. Again, we have some discussion and some remarks. Now this is where it stops for lesson 1. Now we do still have, as we turn the page and we get this page over here, you can see we're coming down through here, workbook page 5. Which we have right here that I pointed out, 1.1b. That is going to be this page of our basics, this page of our practice, and then our challenge. So while that first one seems like there wasn't a whole lot of problems, when you add in that there were that many workbook pages, there's quite a few. I think the biggest thing here is that it doesn't really prompt me to stop and let me know that this is lesson 2. So you'll see there's nothing on the textbook that says lesson 2. It just says C. But looking at the teacher's guide, you can see, okay, this is where we're stopping and lesson 2. So it's just a little bit different, and something that I think I'll just have to get used to is that there's not a stopping point for me to say, hey, go to this workbook, or even go to the workbook that I needed to here. I think it's just when you see these, it's likely telling you there are some workbook pages to go along with that. All of it is really clear in the teacher's guide though. So as long as you're using the teacher's guide, it's clear. Okay, here we go. Now we're going to lesson 2. We're going to do lesson 2. We're going to practice some things. I don't see anything for a workbook here. We're going to keep working. We have some more try it sections there. We're going to keep going, and then you can see we are stopping workbook page 9 before moving on to lesson 3. So it's just a little bit of a different format, but I like the cleanliness of the book. It doesn't feel overly complicated or really wordy. It's just very straight to the point. I like it a lot, and because they have condensed these, the teacher's guide is actually a little bit smaller. Now, let's look at lesson 4 really quick, because this is a little bit different too, in that this would be like your practice page for the chapter. And you can see that, so let's go ahead and jump over to lesson 4 in our textbook. Now, there is not a workbook page to go along with this practice. So we're looking at practice lesson 4, our basic practice here. So this, they're going to have to put over into another notebook, because obviously there's just not enough space to write like there would have been in the past with your textbook. You got a little bit more space to write in, or you would have a workbook page. But there is not a workbook page that coordinates with this practice. So it's only for these other lessons. Then you can see right after you do your little exercise, you're immediately jumping into the next lesson. So there, again, it's not very clear on start stopping, but I think that's probably just going to be a matter of getting used to it. So just kind of flipping through this, you can see it is very, very colorful. While there is quite a bit of things on the page, it's not too much. I really thought it might be a little bit overwhelming, but I don't feel that it is at all, actually. Let's see if we can find one of the nutshell pages. So we should be able to go to the end of the chapter here. All right, end of the chapter here, and we have the in a nutshell. And so it just breaks out all of the information that we have been working on through this whole chapter. I think this would be like maybe very convenient to put like some little page flags on, so that if they needed to go back and reference something really quickly, they could. Then we have the write in your journal section, and it has the greatest common factor and the least common multiple, have many practical uses. It has them to look up other practical applications of those things, and how 2 or more planets will align again, things like that. And then we have our extend your learning curve. Again, this is, on this one right here, it's actually referencing an algorithm right here, and it is having them read up more on that algorithm and use a model to justify why it works. Then we also have the last section of the chapter, which is the problem solving corner. And this is where they are kind of introducing this before and after model, which is a bar model, which helps them to see how things are working post the problem. There are a few pages of this one. So we've got an example and a try it, example number 3 with a try it, and then some more practice questions. Now again, these answers are going to be in the back of their textbook, but then you are also going to have the answers in your teacher's book. I had mentioned that they wouldn't be putting like any of the answers up in here, but if you look at the original class activity here, and then you look at the reference here, there actually is some of the red markings on what the children might write, what the correct answers would be, along with the red section down here. Jumping back to the end of the chapter for our teacher's book, we have our little in the nutshell section right there before we move over onto writing in the journal. So it talks a little bit about how to use the nutshell page, have the students do a writing activity, and then the extend your learning curve. It tells you that the students need to look up the algorithm on the internet and that it's an activity that could be completed in class or done as an independent assignment. So you could kind of decide how you wanted to do that. And then we have our lesson 15, which is the last one, and that is that problem solving center. On the try it, it has how to work it out, how the units would need to be drawn out, and how that answer gets finished. And the same thing for all of these. You have the notes and the examples on how all of this is going to work. So as they are wrapping up the very end section, they have these 3 examples and then some practice questions here. Again, these questions are going to be in the back of their book, and then it says to have the students practice the questions 1 through 7, try to work together, but they should also try to do it independently first. So that would be something you could give them to try, and then if they can't get it, they could come back to you. Then we're moving on to chapter 2. And we are following the very same sort of setup that we had before, where it shows all of our lessons. You can see all the class periods are 1, textbook, workbook pages, the teacher's guide pages, and the additional materials that you're going to need. It really spells it out really nicely for you. So whether you're a homeschool teacher or you are using this in the classroom, I like the way that they are representing everything and showing you all of the things that are going to be covered in this chapter. So this is the teacher's book, all nice and colorful. We have the little images of their workbook pages again on that side, and the answers are going to be over here in this section for the try it sections, and they are going to have the answers for the other questions in the back of the student textbook. The workbook, really quickly, we'll look into that. Here it just is breaking out the contents again like we saw over in the original section, and you have all of the workbook pages here. So they are broken out by your 3.4 and the practice, and then we have 4.1. Again, you're not going to have a workbook page for every single lesson, which is, again, another adjustment, but nothing too major. I think it's really nice. We're going to briefly jump over here into the 6B, which is where it tells us that we are moving on to algebra. So we have our 6B workbook, our 6B textbook, and our teacher's guide here. Again, the workbook solutions for both A and B are going to be in this small book right here. And they're just broken out by the basics and the practice. You just find the chapter. Everything's really, really consolidated. There's not a lot of waste of space, and that makes everything a little bit smaller and more condensed, which is really nicely. I am going to show you the content with the textbook again, just so that it is broken out more of exactly what is done. We have the textbook features like we had on our last one. We have the same nutshell and write in your journal and extending your learning curve, BrainWorks. All of these are just like we saw previously, but now we have our contents here. So let's zoom in and check this out. We are looking at Chapter 8, Algebraic Expressions, and you can see the things that are going to be talked about in that lesson. Here we have, in a nutshell, write in your journal and extend your learning curve. So it doesn't have the problem-solving center on Chapter 8. Chapter 9 is Equations and Inequalities. We are dealing with equations, then inequalities, and then we have the 4 ending sections of the chapter. Chapter 10 is coordinates and graphs. So you can see we're looking at the coordinate plane, the distance, the changes in the quantities, and then we have 3 of the ending chapter sections. Chapter 11 is the area of plane figures, where we're talking about rectangles, parallelograms, triangles. Then we are moving over to volume and surface area of solids, where we're talking about the volume of rectangular prisms, the surface area of the prisms, and then we have the 4 sections at the end of the chapter. Chapter 13 is displaying and comparing data, where we have statistical variability, displaying and numerical data, measures of variability, and box plots. So we're talking about range, mean, and all sorts of fun stuff with that. And then we have 3 things. In the very end of the book, on page 247, we are going to get the answers to all of the questions that are part of this textbook right here. Just because you're moving over into algebra doesn't mean that this is changing much as far as the way that it's set up. You still have your chapter opener. You still have your lessons, your examples, your try it, all your remarks and discussions. There's little like math bits over here where it kind of tells you where did the word algebra come from. Lots of examples, lots of try it's before you would be moving on over into your workbook. Again, you'll have to reference that teacher's book to know exactly when you're going to be stopping, just because it doesn't have the indicator on the textbook like you would have had before. Just like, I don't know, I didn't mention this, but there are also these little section here where you can see where the chapters are broken out, and so it's just easy to find it. If you know you're on a certain chapter, you can go to the color coordinated. It is the same way on the teacher's guide. You can see there's a little bit of coloring there, and then the workbook just has the blue edges. So there's no color coordinating with the workbook, but there is with the teacher's guide and the workbook. Let's see what our supplements might be. Quickly looking at the teacher's guide, let's see if there are any supplement pages or anything here at the back. So it doesn't look like it. It just ends with chapter 13. So there's no extra pages that we might have had in the back. But overall, I'm really, really excited about this level. I am pleasantly surprised with how it is set up, even though there are some changes to it as far as just getting used to where to do the workbook, how to do the workbook, different sections like that. This is Dimensions Math. So if you have done any of the previous levels, I really don't see that you're going to have too much of a struggle moving over into this one. It's streamlined, it's easy to read, the font is nice. Overall, I'm really, really excited. I think this is going to be a fantastic year for math, to be honest, because I know that we're going over into algebra in the second part. I feel like that gives us a little bit more freedom on using this one at a slightly slower pace, and still being able to get everything done because we are so ahead on our levels here. But if you have any questions or comments, please put them down below. If you found this video helpful, I would appreciate a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. See you in my next one.